Hello again, everyone. Geoff Micks here with a quick announcement at the top of today's episode. I recorded this conversation with Marvin Cooke of Toyota Europe a few weeks before we launched Executive Platform's YouTube channel. Over the last year and more, it has become one of our most popular podcasts of all time. Very little of the conversation is in any way dated. In fact, other than us discussing the 2023 edition of the European Supply Chain Executive Summit in the future tense, everything we discuss is as relevant today as it was when we recorded it. The 2024 edition of the European Supply Chain Executive Summit series is now a couple of months away, and so I would like to bring this episode out of our back catalog and give it another chance to find a new audience for the people in our network who find their content here. I hope you enjoy it. Hello again, everyone. You're listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. My name is Geoff Micks. I'm Executive Platform's Head of Content and Research. My guest today is Marvin Cooke. He's the Executive Vice President Manufacturing for Toyota Motor Europe. Based in Brussels, Marvin oversees all of Toyota's European manufacturing companies, production engineering, logistics, the Toyota production system, and the production control functions. Marvin joined Toyota Manufacturing in the UK as a manufacturing engineer in 1991 and has held numerous management positions of increasing seniority throughout Europe. Today, Marvin is leading Toyota's European manufacturing team along the journey from being an automobile company to becoming a mobility company. He's also going to be a member of the speaker faculty of the European Supply Chain Executive Summit this June in Barcelona. But first, I get to ask him a few questions here on the Blueprint. Marvin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Geoff. And thank you for having me today. Great to be here.
Before we get too far into things, I want to give listeners a little more about you. I understand you studied electrical and electronic engineering in university. How far back does your interest in engineering go? And did you think as a young person you might one day be a senior leader of one of the world's largest automotive manufacturers?
Well, Geoff, I have to say that to answer the second part first, I'd never imagined that I would be a senior leader of one of the world's leading automotive manufacturers, and I'm really proud to be that. But, I think although I may not have recognized it as engineering at a young age, at a very young age, I was always known for disassembling and occasionally reassembling the toys rather than playing with them. I think I just had a real keen interest in how things worked. And then I remember I got into electronics at a young age after receiving a Christmas gift, which was a hobby electronics kit. I would have been about 10 or 11 years old, I guess. And I've always had a keen interest in music and playing electric guitar. So at a young age, electronics, guitar, making amplifiers, effects pedals, that kind of all merged into one. So that by the time I was 16 and going for my first job interview, I had quite a collection of electronic projects which I took with me, gave some interest in the interview, and I'm pleased to say that's how I started my career as an engineering apprentice at the Pirelli Tire Company.
I love that. So when you think back to your time working for Pirelli Tire Company or as a consulting engineer for the food and beverage industry, what do you think about your journey from there to here would surprise your younger self the most?
Well, I think I was always ambitious and probably quite competitive. And I think earlier in my career, I always found it difficult to see what kind of career path I may take. I looked around me, I saw a lot of people doing the same thing over a number of years. So, here I am now, 32 years later in Toyota, still with the company, still enjoying it. And I think, the surprise thing probably for me is the fact that I've been able to enjoy such a broad and varied career, working in many different roles in various different locations, all within the same organization. And I think, that's a wonderful thing when an organization allows you to change your role and responsibility as part of your development. It keeps it interesting, and I think it keeps you with the company. Probably that's a surprise to me and something that, I didn't imagine 32 years ago that I may be sitting here today, still a member of the Toyota family.
In my introduction, I mentioned briefly that Toyota is in the process of reinventing itself from being an automobile company into a mobility company. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, recently our new president and CEO, Koji Sato, explained sort of further Toyota's transformation path when he outlined Toyota's mobility concept, building our business around carbon neutrality and the value of mobility. And put briefly, in three parts, Mobility 1.0 aims to extend the value of the car. For example, battery electric vehicles offer new possibilities to collectively serve as a mobile grid and enhance energy security in society. Mobility 2.0, well, we're aiming to expand mobility into new areas to support those in danger of being left behind. We always say in Toyota that no one should be left behind. That's why we have this multi-technology approach. So this includes solutions for elderly, maybe people living in depopulated areas, people in emerging markets where even the car market is still yet to mature. So we're developing a range of products and services, which include things like e-pallet and services in the mobility as a service domain. And then there's Mobility 3.0, and this is really about integration with social systems, creating mobility ecosystem that ties into energy and transportation systems, the way we live, and the way that we're integrated with cities and societies. And an example in Japan right now, Toyota's building what is called Woven City, described as a living laboratory for all of these various concepts, and among them being CO2-free hydrogen supply chain. Quite exciting stuff, I think. Yeah.
It is. And I think maybe you answered my question where you're talking about 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, but where does Toyota see that journey going? Is there a final destination in mind, or is this transition more connected to Toyota's culture of continuous improvement, where the journey is the point and it's not supposed to end?
Yeah, I don't really think in Toyota we talk about final destinations. It's always been a journey in my mind, and we just keep adding new stops along the way. We're going through what we describe as a once in a century period of profound transformation. And let's not forget that Toyota started out as an automated loom maker and sold the patents to fund its automotive business to the Platt brothers a long time ago in the UK. So, if we look from where we came to where we are now, I can't say that mobility company is going to be a destination. I think it's just part of the journey.
Now, the presentation you'll be giving at European Supply Chain Executive Summit is entitled A Lean Approach to Carbon Neutrality. Can you tell us why you wanted to talk about that particular topic, and also give us a little bit of a preview about what you plan to share with the audience in Barcelona?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been working back in the head office in Europe, heading up the manufacturing operations from 2020. And at the time when I first moved into the head office in Brussels, I saw opportunity to really clarify our direction for the future of manufacturing right across Europe. And, working with the team, we saw three key pillars. The first was competitiveness. We're going through this profound transformation and we need to be able to afford that. Innovation, we have to make breakthroughs in the way we do things in the future. And people, organization of the future. I always have a great belief that people are the most important asset in the company and define the success or otherwise of our business. And, carbon neutrality features very much in our innovation pillar. And I really chose to talk about that because it's very close to my heart. I talk of it as it's a mandatory requirement, to be a sustainable business, but it also comes with a number of challenges. And in this case, we're very much still on the journey, but hopefully, I can share something of interest to others by explaining a relatively broader outlook of our activities going end to end of our business.
I know one of the points you want to discuss as part of Toyota's sustainability story is improving biodiversity at manufacturing sites. Tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, well, I think we all talk about reducing and minimizing the impacts of our business to the environment, so carbon neutrality, carbon zero, and so on. But I think it was more than 10 years ago when I was deputy manager and director of our UK plants. And I was responsible at that time, of course, including environment. And, my team were updating the environmental action plan. And of course, it included things like increasing use of renewable energy, reducing environmental impacts, water, VOC, carbon, etc. But it also included being in harmony with nature and enhancing biodiversity on the site. And that intrigued me. we can never say that the biodiversity is better on our site because we have a factory. We can't evidence that. But I think, the positive adjustments that we make by the way we care for the site, we operate on the site, can actually enhance the biodiversity of the site. And, this for me was an interesting journey because it's something that we could not do alone. We had some interesting partnerships we still have today, including environmental organizations like the Royal Kew Gardens, the Wildlife Trust, and so on. But it's very much been about creating uninterrupted corridors for wildlife. And we've been able to measure, quite some improvements in the biodiversity on the site as a result of that. So for me, this was like, why not? Why should we not go beyond what we might think as normal environmental activities?
Toyota's lean culture and the Toyota production system are famous across just about every industry, and for good reason. How do you think they are going to help your organization achieve carbon neutrality?
Yeah, I mean, TPS for me, Toyota Production System, is about giving the customer the highest quality product in the shortest lead time and at a reasonable price. And, simply said to me, it's achieved by a relentless quest to eliminate waste in all of its forms. And at the heart of that, are our people engaged in it. And of course, not one of us can say we've yet eliminated all of the waste. Again, it's a journey. But, when you think about it, if you eliminate waste, whether it be scrap, overproduction, over processing, and so on, then that's got to have a positive benefit to the environment. So to me, the Toyota production system and carbon neutrality go absolutely hand in hand. There's great synergy. And for me, also a key part of the Toyota production system is that everyone can make their own contribution to improve the design of their own work. So it means this includes making a contribution to improving carbon neutrality. And again, the Toyota production system is very much based on visualizing and, visualizing the environmental impacts of each equipment or process in our plants, in our operations, allows all of our team members to get involved and begin the process of carbon neutrality improvement.
For other senior executives who are listening to this and who are working on their own transformations, is there something from your experience that you want to share with them and have them try to apply to their own working lives?
Well, I think any transformation, of course, requires us as leaders to create a vision that everyone, irrespective of their role or organization level, can understand. And I don't think there's particularly anything special that I'm saying there, but I think the real magic happens in transformation when you can engage the maximum number of people within its deployment, within its execution. And what we've been doing for a number of years is always trying to establish our mid to long-term plans with cross-functional leaders, owners, and advisors to each activity. I think that's important because it keeps diverse and it gives a disruptive element if you've got more cross-functional and diverse leaders. But I think on top of that, if I've learned anything over the years, it's about allowing the people who do the daily work to use their infinite wisdom because they know what works well and what doesn't. And I think, our job as leaders, we have the responsibility to give our people the tools and the opportunities to use that wisdom. And, many times I've spoke about lean manufacturing to many people, and often I'm asked, how do you evaluate the cost benefit to the time and resources you put to the Kaizen or continuous improvement effort involving your team members? Do you spend a lot of time evaluating that before you start? And the answer is very simple. We don't. If we spent all of that time evaluating whether or not a Kaizen or a small continuous improvement was worth the time, then we'd get nothing done. Of course, it's different when you're looking at larger investment projects. We go through the full due diligence and thorough analysis. But I think the one thing for me and the standout point that I recognize in Toyota is when we talk about Toyota production system, and we talk about pillars of just in time, or the Jidoka, the built-in quality pillar, or the foundation of standardization. What often people miss to talk about at the Toyota production system's heart are flexible, motivated members. Again, giving the opportunity for all of our employees to deploy their infinite wisdom. And that's the one thing I'd say, listen to your people.
Well, I love that that's the takeaway you want to give, because the next thing I want to talk about is people. Let's talk about talent and workforce issues. Toyota is an employer of choice, of course, but I'm sure even Toyota has had to adjust some of its processes over the last few years. Could you tell us a little about what's new in talent attraction, development, and retention at Toyota Motor Europe?
As an employee, you've always got to realize there's a lot of competition out there for talent. And I'm pretty sure that people's expectations joining Toyota today are quite different to that I had probably when I joined more than 30 years ago. And I think a number of changes we've been working on over the last few years. First of all, the working arrangements, particularly now in our head office and all of the office areas across our manufacturing operations. We have a hybrid working arrangement. We've fully embraced this hybrid working in all of the locations to give more flexibility than ever, and also more recently in our offices in the head office and technical center in Belgium, we've tried to create a much nicer, varied workspace for people. People want different spaces for different activities, and we've really tried to embrace and recognize that. And I think the other thing is, if you look at the automotive industry particularly, it's not got a great reputation of being diverse. We have many nationalities working for us across Europe and in our head office, but we still have a lot to do. There are not enough women in what we call the STEM subjects, as science, technology, engineering, and math areas. So we've got a big job to do there, and that's something we've really tried to improve. And you've got to be attractive, and you've got to have the right working environments, and we have to create equity, in opportunities. And if we look today and across our industry, there is not enough representation. There's not enough diverse representation across the management and above grades. So it's changing, and we have lots of sponsorship programs, management education, because often we don't recognize ourselves, our blind spots or our unconscious bias, and we're really trying to work through that and create a much more diverse organization. I'm really pleased to say also, particularly, the areas I take care of in manufacturing, we've been now in a number of our plants recruiting 50-50 male and female employees, which is really a first for us. And that's in the production operations on the production line. And, if we have the diversity there, then that gives us a great future right through the organization. And diversity brings with it creativity, innovation, and best business performance.
You touched on it a little bit already, but I want to talk about. So I feel like we've all gotten comfortable using the term "the new normal of work" without really agreeing on the definition yet. What does it mean to you? And do you think where we are today is going to be how things are a few years from now? Or are things still very much in flux?
New normal or never normal? I don't know which one to say or use. I moved into the head office operations again in January 2020, and life seemed quite normal then. And then, of course, we went through COVID, global shipping issues, hyperinflation, war in Ukraine, and it seemed so many things happening one after another, or one on top of another. And of course, in the manufacturing industry, particularly automotive, we've had a lot of challenges with supply chain issues, particularly in the area of semiconductor, electronics. So I would say several things. I think we've become all more resilient to, shall we say, a never normal situation. When I walk around the office and speak to our people today, I think compared to 1.5 years ago, they would have said to me, "Oh, I'll be really happy when things get back to normal. All these crises, we'll be past that and things will be normal." Well, I think today, the challenges are still there. but we've just got better at handling them, and our resilience has become better. Now, if I look more specifically for our industry, certainly I think the supply outlook is looking better. Koji Sato, our global president, speaking this week, said expecting global sales in this year to grow. I expect to grow around 11%. So that shows where we're heading. But I think, as Toyota, we did learn a lot when we go back 10 or 12 years ago. And we had the tsunami in Japan, and we learned a lot then about supply chain resilience. So, I think that certainly helped us prepare for what came 2020 onwards. But I do think the sort of never normal situation has still got some life in it yet.
What advice would you have for young people at the start of their careers who hope one day to rise through the ranks and lead an organization the way you do now?
Well, that's always a challenging question, and it's always a very personal question. And I suppose my answers can only be built upon a combination of the things I've learned or experienced. And I would say, first of all, never be limited to conventional thinking. In Toyota, we talk about start your impossible. So I think it's important not to let others tell you what's impossible or not. So take ownership in whatever field you choose, and make your own way. I think secondly, success is not final, and failure is not fatal. Learn from your mistakes. And I always say I don't worry about people making mistakes. I will more worry that people might not make mistakes, because I think it's from those that you learn the most. Don't stop learning. Don't ever stop being a student. Be open-minded. Be open to change. And this is sometimes a tough one, but love what you're doing. If your heart's not into something, you're never going to give it 100%. So try and love what you do and do it to the best of your ability. And I think finally for me, if I can have one more, then of course in business it's often required to make tough decisions or difficult decisions. And but I think it's always important to remember to be kind. I couldn't have achieved half of what I've gotten to today without the support of many, many others. And I'm extremely grateful for that.
I have a lot of conversations about supply chain disruption these days, and I imagine you do too. I think most people agree we're living in a time where frequent disruption should be considered the norm, and we're far enough into it now that most supply chain executives have started adjusting their processes to be more robust and resilient in the face of disruption. Can you tell us a little bit about what Toyota Motor Europe is doing in that space?
I think it's very true to say for a long time as automotive OEMs, we didn't suffer with frequent supply chain issues, but of course that's all changed, particularly with the semiconductor issue. As I've mentioned before, we did learn a lot from the tsunami in Japan and its impacts. Toyota, it's a lean, just-in-time company, but I think it's important to really think and understand what that means. It doesn't mean zero inventory. It doesn't mean zero stock. It means having the minimum number of parts on hand to maintain smooth, continuous flow production. So after the tsunami, we recognized we were vulnerable in areas of semiconductors and some electronic components. So we did recognize, to sustain smooth, continuous flow production, we required some higher inventories in some cases, or dual sourcing. So, I think this is a very important point, and you have to set those inventories based upon the true capability of the whole supply chain. Otherwise, you create another waste. The Toyota production system is about eliminating the 7 wastes, and one of them is waiting. So if you're waiting for parts, that's no good. So it would be much better to have the correct number to keep continuous flow. I think the other element, if I may add one, is the importance of good communication and good visualization within the supply chain. With Toyota, we don't chop and change our suppliers, too often. We try and create long-term relationships, and that's got to be two-way communication and visualization of the reality. And, we welcome bad news first. We don't want to hear at the last minute something's going wrong. we encourage throughout the whole of the business at every level, when you see something that's not right, raise it. Bad news first.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned long-term partnerships because, of course, Toyota is part of an ecosystem of businesses, and it's not enough just to prepare your own people and processes for disruption. Yeah, how is Toyota working with its partners to build resiliency and responsiveness into their organizations as well?
I think as an OEM, you have to really respect the supply chain and understand the challenges that they face. So being transparent and giving good quality forecasts is so important, so they can plan and they can understand, if something will happen or correctly, or if there's going to be a difficulty. And I think, another thing we always say in Toyota is don't try and do it alone. We're here to help. Toyota resources are often deployed to support the supply chain, and we'd much rather do that than suffer the consequences later. And I think, another thing we've learned is that, particularly with things like semiconductor, if in the development stage of a product, as an OEM, if we're open to alternatives and agree them at that stage, it makes it a lot easier than trying to discuss alternative commodities at a much later stage. And I think finally Toyota, just picking on that point, I think we're pretty open to share, our learnings and the Toyota production system with others, and particularly with our suppliers. And we really don't mind if they use it in their operations, in their factories, to improve their delivery to other OEMs. As long as they do it for us, it's okay.
I'd like to end today's conversation with a question I'm asking everybody who joins us for one of these longer interviews. Now, you're a leader and you have a team and an organization that looks to you for guidance and support. I'd like you to talk about someone who has shaped who you are and how you lead. And you don't need to name any names if you'd prefer not to, of course. But what is the biggest takeaway you gained from your time with that person that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, I won't mention names. But what I would say is I think we're all shaped by both the leaders of the past who we've respected the most and those less so. It's sure, for sure I've had several tough bosses who I describe as being firm but fair. But if they're fair, that has connected with me. And the leaders who remember that people are the most important asset at every level of the organization surely are the leaders who have connected with me, the most. And from a very early stage, not only in my time in Toyota, but particularly in my Toyota career, those leaders who've made time to speak with everyone and anyone and always remembered to say thank you. Those are the ones who've had the greatest influence. And of course, leaders who recognize customer first, and anecdotally, I remember as a young engineer working at our plant in the UK, I'd been working through the night to help fix a problem on the line. And I remembered arriving back to the office after lunchtime, after catching some sleep. And the production director saw me come in and headed straight to me. First of all, asked me, "Are you okay?" And said, "Thank you." And, that's enough to put a spring in your step for a long time. So that's the kind of leader I would like to be, because that's the kind of leader that's influenced me the most.
I think that's a fantastic thing to end on and hope people really do think about and apply into their own leadership style. So, this has been such a wonderful conversation, Marvin, and I really appreciate your time today. And I encourage everybody who's been listening, he will be speaking at the European Supply Chain Executive Summit in Barcelona. So please be sure to attend his session. Marvin, thank you so much for your time today.
Geoff, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to Barcelona. Thank you.
You've been listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. I've been Geoff Micks. Let's do it again soon.